Hi, everyone. I'm Dan Jones. Welcome to Interchange, and thank you so very much for taking the time to join us. Okay, what an interesting week it has been. Lots to talk about. The Republicans lose 2 Senate seats in the recall elections, but each side is claiming victory. We'll talk about that. Crime rates in the city of Milwaukee have fallen under Chief Ed Flynn, but the wait time to get a cop when you need one is, in some instances, is getting longer and longer. Is that the trade-off? And we'll talk about the resurrection of the idea for a Winterfest in downtown Milwaukee. All right, let me introduce everyone. We have newspaper columnist Joel McNally. Kevin Fischer, longtime broadcaster, political analyst, and oftentimes a fill-in host on WISN Talk Radio. And Denise Callaway, the coordinator of business and community partnerships for the Milwaukee Public School District. And Gerard Randall, education consultant and local job creation expert. Rick Horowitz will be along with commentary at the end of the show. All right, first let's talk about the recall elections. The Republicans lose 2 races but win 4. They still control the Senate by a 1-vote margin. There are 2 more recall elections this coming Tuesday. So are the Republicans still firmly in control or just barely in control? And what happens from this point forward, do you think, Denise?
Well, I think that we're already seeing some of what's happening, particularly in the race that's the recall race that's in the northern part of the state, where a lot of money is pouring in. We're seeing more negative ads, more, the only people who win in that case are the broadcasters and, the local printing companies that are printing all this material and airing all these different ads. I do think that both Democrats are going to hold on to their seats. I don't want to say I told you so to anybody, but I did predict that the Democrats would pick up 2 seats. And I think that what Governor Walker had to say about the fact that what Wisconsinites were telling people is they expected these 2 parties to work together is what we will need to see. And I think that's the direction in which we have to go. So are they firmly in control? I think they'll still have that 1-vote margin by the time that it's all over. But I don't know that we can say they're going to be firmly in control. Clearly, it's their agenda that's going to move forward, but I think they're going to be a couple of critical senators that we'll have to pay attention to, Ellis and Schultz, who have tended to be a little more moderate than other Republicans. They may very well play the same kind of role that Gary George played years ago when he was in the Senate and was that 1-vote majority for Democrats. So I think we'll have to see just what moves forward now, because whatever moves forward, the message that I think people clearly sent was, we expect there to be some cooperation. Wasn't a clean sweep for the Democrats, wasn't a clean sweep for the Republicans. The big winner in this probably were those folks who were broadcasters in the markets where those races were, because by the time it's all over, we could have as much as $40 million that was spent on these recall races. Kevin, and the losers were those of us who had to sit through and watch all the ads.
Yeah. Kevin, do you think there's any chance that the Republicans will win either of those spots on Tuesday?
I think they do have a chance. I think they have a stronger chance in the northern seat where Holprin has been considered to be vulnerable for some time. Bob Wirch is not the strongest sitting member of the state Senate, but he always seems to pull it off, although I hear now he's playing that class warfare game of trying to scare seniors, which didn't work this past week, because he's starting to feel a little nervous now and feel the heat. I think that one could stay with the Democrats, but that's not a lock. Anything could happen. Again, we're in uncharted waters. What happened this week, I think, will happen next week, in that you're going to have both sides energized and both sides will turn out. The conventional wisdom this week, which turned out to be wrong, was that the Democrats would be far more energized and that they had the stronger organization with unions and union supporters, and that maybe some conservatives would stay home. That was not the case. But there is a good chance now, well, maybe not a good chance, but there is a chance that Republicans could pick up 1, maybe 2 seats. And if that happens, think about that. Then the net effect of this is 0. We go back to 1914.
And Republicans are already back to 1914.
That's devastating. I mean, let's be real. The Democrats are trying to put a positive spin by saying, well, we won 2 seats. This is a devastating loss, especially for the unions who pumped everything, millions and millions of dollars into these races. They went after Republicans with everything they had. Even President Obama's people came in. They had death threats. They screamed and they beat drums and on and on and on. And the Republicans withstood it all. And if you're the union's going, wow, we spent all this money and we didn't gain control. We're still entrenched in the minority. I bet it makes them reconsider whether they recall Governor Walker. And if they decide to do that, bring it on. Waste more millions.
Do you think they'll go ahead with that?
Sure they will.
Yeah.
Sure they will. By definition, these recalls this week were in all Republican districts. And not only were they all Republican districts, they were Republican districts that had been won by Republicans during the election of Barack Obama, where Barack Obama won a landslide in Wisconsin, and these were the Republican state senators that withstood that. So we knew it was tough. We knew it was hard. The fact that, yes, Democrats won 2 elections in Republican districts is a good start. And it's a very good start on recalling Scott Walker because, no matter what kind of corrupt redistricting the Republicans have just passed, Scott Walker will be recalled statewide. That's a statewide election. That means all the Democratic areas get to vote too, not just 6 Republican districts. And the Democrats actually picked up 7 or 8 points in those Republican districts, 7 or 8 percentage points in Republican districts. Think how much they're going to pick up in Democratic districts and in strong union districts and in Milwaukee and Madison and La Crosse. So the interesting thing coming up this week to me, and I may be kidding myself, and I've done it before.
You picked all 6 last week, so you are kidding yourself.
Everybody knows I only predict things I want to happen. But I will say on these 2 Democratic districts, truthfully, I think the Republican Party, I may be kidding myself about this, I think they're better than the Tea Party. I don't think that the Republican Party, most Republicans I know are not hateful people who want to destroy this country and destroy the Democratic Party and destroy Barack Obama. They are decent people. They care about education. They don't want to destroy public education. So the fact that the Republicans are running 2 Tea Party candidates in these 2 districts, I don't even think they've run their strongest candidates. This woman up in, boy, the woman up north that Kevin says is going to win. She's against taxes, but she never pays any.
Yeah.
She doesn't pay her own taxes. She doesn't pay her property taxes. She's delinquent for a decade. She is not a strong candidate, and I think Republicans are better than these Tea Party people. The fact that it's now just a 1-vote margin in the Senate, I think that the Republicans are going to not be as ugly and extreme as they have been since Scott Walker got elected, because they don't want to lose their seats like those two Republicans did this time.
If you're Scott Walker, are you more nervous or less nervous than you were a week ago?
Oh, less nervous. First off, there were 5 Republican districts, 1 Democratic district that had a Republican senator, and that was La Crosse.
A Republican who won while Barack Obama was winning.
He won. He ran against Ron Kind. That district is, for the most part, a Democratic district. Holprin's district is a Republican district, and that one is the one that stands the likelihood of flipping from a Democratic senator to a Republican senator. All that being said, the Republican agenda in the first part of in the last 6 months has already been passed. There's not a whole heck of a lot for of the big issue stuff that's still left. Voter ID is done. The legislative redistricting is done. The budget, certainly until a budget repair bill comes up, that's done. The piece concealed carry. That's
every ugly thing they could pass, they passed.
Well, all the things that certainly are contentious have passed. And the last pieces that the governor would have to move through are jobs initiatives, which certainly there's going to be a lot. Issue. That's right. There's going to be a lot more of a love fest. Kind of is what Joel pointed out. I'd really like to have that piece available to play again in the future when Republicans take action that he may not like.
All right. Next topic. The Journal-Sentinel did an interesting piece this week that shows while crime rates in Milwaukee are down under Chief Ed Flynn, that comes at a price. The price is this. Wait times for a cop to respond to some non-emergency calls is getting longer and longer because Flynn has less officers, or more of his officers, laser focused in the high crime areas where they are needed most. And everyone seems to agree that that has worked and the crime rate has gone down in those areas. But does any taxpayer in Milwaukee deserve to wait an hour if you call a cop?
Well,
because they broke into your house or your car?
Yeah, I understand. You know, I read that story and I kept trying to figure out what the problem was because, yes, there are wait times when you call for a police officer. For the most part, that doesn't matter. The crime has already happened. The damage has been done. I've said before that we actually put too much on our police officers when we expect them to prevent crime all over this city. Usually they come after the fact. They come after it's done. And does it matter if they get there 10 minutes after it happens or 20 minutes or an hour?
It does to the victim, Joel.
No, I've been a victim, and I'll tell you, it doesn't matter that much.
It does.
It does not matter that much. When my wife and I were robbed at gunpoint, we had each other. The perpetrators were gone. Believe me, the relief was there that it was over. And when the police showed up, that was just a lot of rigmarole you had to go through to repeat your story over and over, to describe everything over and over. Don't you want the police to be available to respond to emergency calls? The fact that the newspaper could make a big deal that people have to wait an hour after a non-emergency call, I think this is the best use of the resources we have.
But is
to respond to emergencies and crimes in progress and things like that. Not, you might be a little disappointed that, well, we had to wait a half hour and we didn't get to tell our story yet. But I can't quite imagine that's not the most important thing.
Is part of the concern, though, that
the community,
the history, because of the history of the city, if you call a police officer, I don't care what the reason is, you expect a police officer there within minutes.
Well, you do expect them there within minutes, but unfortunately, I actually agree with Joel on this. The police, to me, seem to be more geared now towards investigation, apprehension, and prosecution. That is...
Which everybody agrees seems to be working.
That piece of it does seem to be working if you look at it from the standpoint that potential perpetrators are now off the street if they're recidivist. The piece that does bother me, though, is the response time, the availability of police when you do have some of those issues that require crowd management, the issue at State Fair, the issue at River West, some of the issues that
was more a jurisdiction problem, I think, than response. I think when the MPD showed up, they solved a lot of the problems at State Fair.
Well, they at that point, because State Fair police, I think they're not. They didn't have enough people for starters.
Right.
But by the time all the jurisdictions got there, yeah, there was better management of what they had left to deal with. So at the end of it all, I do think that these response times are going to be the trade-offs that we're going to have to accept because that's the way this chief believes policing ought to take place. And if the trade-off on the positive end is going to be that a stronger police presence in those areas where there's perceived high crime helps to prevent crime from taking place so that we actually see crime rates go down somewhat as a result, then so be it.
Kevin, this was the first chief that I remember, that I can remember, that hasn't said, I need more officers, I've got to have 100 more officers or 200 more officers. Is that just reality? He knows he's not going to get them, so he's not going to argue for them. Is he just facing reality? This is how much money I have to deal with. I have to cut down on the overtime. I can't have 200 more officers.
This is his approach, and yes, it is working to a certain degree, as was pointed out by the Journal-Sentinel, and I thought they did a very, very thorough, well-written piece. I ripped the paper from time to time. I thought this was a very, very good act of journalism.
You've gone further than I would.
Well, okay, we disagree. Imagine that on an opinionated program. This chief is fixated. He is obsessed with numbers and data and spreadsheets that make him and his department look good. He can't wait to go in front of a mountain of microphones and cameras and tell you that. And I must have missed that press conference where the data shows that there are all these complaints and instances and incidents of poor response time. This is not a new problem in the city of Milwaukee. This has been a recurring problem with previous chiefs and the police department. And no one in this studio is more supportive of the Milwaukee Police Department than I am. But I believe that you should never compromise police protection, okay? And I'm sorry, as the one alderman said, this isn't a case where a dog has done an accident on your lawn. These are serious cases. And when you are the victim of a crime, and when you've made that call, and not only the police show up late, but when they get there, they give the cavalier attitude that they don't care, guess what? Then all those numbers that the chief talks about how this crime has gone down and this crime has gone down, that is meaningless to someone who's been burglarized.
Well, I have to tell you, a couple of years ago, we had somebody break into our garage, try to get our snowblower out of the garage. I don't know how long it took for the police to get there, but I felt, given the fact that it was a crime where that individual was no longer there, they clearly were not around, they didn't get anything, they just broke the door. I thought it was a very reasonable response for what clearly for me was something that was very upsetting, but it wasn't an emergency. And I think the chief's policy here is you only have so many resources. There's only so much that you can do. Where does it make the sense to spend most of your time and to respond as quickly as possible? And it is on those critical cases where a crime is in progress, where someone's life hangs in the balance, where someone has been murdered or shot, and you need to find out what happened as soon as you can.
And I agree with Denise.
That's where those resources need to go.
But this panel, other than myself, seems to be giving this particular police chief a pass on the issue of police response time, when historically in this city, previous chiefs have been raked over the coals about this very issue. I'm not sure why. I'm not sure why Ed Flynn. I'm not sure why Ed Flynn shouldn't face the same criticism.
I don't think it's that he's not facing the criticism. I think it's a realization that this is a different city with different kinds of crimes and more serious crimes than there were when Harold Breyer was police chief or when Phil Areola was police chief. It is a different kind of crime. There are much more serious crimes that are happening, and the police have to decide where they're going to put those resources. Now, would I prefer that when I called, a police officer was there like in 5 minutes instead of maybe 15 minutes or half an hour? Of course. But I also would like to think that if I had a serious incident occurring in my neighborhood, or anybody else on this panel did who lives in the city of Milwaukee, that the police are going to be there and see that that is a priority above something that is a crime that's already taken place.
One of the things that this chief does, and he talks about data-driven policing, he puts his police where the problems are before the problems happen. That is what the community has always wanted. I mean, they expect the police to prevent crime. I think it's a unrealistic expectation sometimes, but I think you do want the police in the areas where the biggest problems are. And this is a new era. I mean, this is an era where a police chief can look at data and know exactly where his police officers ought to be and put them there. It's not seat of the pants stuff anymore. It really is driven by the data.
If it's reducing gang intimidation, open air drug dealing, prostitution, those kinds of things, it's clearly having some level of effect.
Yes, and there's no disagreement there, but some areas of the city should not get short-shrifted.
I agree.
All right. Next topic. The city of Milwaukee is going to try to host a Winterfest celebration again this coming December, 10 days. Now, they've tried this before. It was a failure. This time, organizers say the goal is family-friendly events, most of which will be held inside at the Frontier Airlines Center. All right. Could a Winterfest ever be as popular as a Summerfest here in Milwaukee? And if you were staging something like this, how would you do it?
Here we go.
Ooh. I do think it can be successful. I don't think you're going to see things like the large concerts, and certainly a lot of the outdoor activity is going to be much more minimal than what some people may have running through their minds about what this Winterfest is going to be. But if you take a look at things like the outdoor rinks that are very popular, the number of activities that you can stage indoors if you've got a large enough venue to do that, and certainly the arena and the convention center can host those kinds of things. Yeah, you can have a nice enough 10-day event that will attract enough people to be able to call it a success at the end of it all. I don't think, though, that they're going to be able to hold on to a lot of the sponsors that have invested somewhat in this in the first year if this is not a big crowd draw. Because people are going to say, well, it's just more of the same. So they're going to have to really come up with something strong in terms of marketing, packaging, that will get people down there this year and they'll be able to call it a success. 100,000 people is going to have to be the minimum number of people, I think, that they're going to have in these venues over that 10-day period in order to call it a success.
Kevin, it seems like they're trying to make it a big family thing. Would it have been better to make it an adult-oriented, alcohol-induced music festival like Summerfest
Like Summerfest?
Yeah, and maybe even do it on the Summerfest grounds?
That's not what Summerfest is.
Yeah, it is.
Oh, yeah, it is.
Maybe, but okay, I guess I'm going to have to be the Grinch here, and I wish them all the success in the world, but they did try it once before, and you underestimated what a failure it was. It was a major flop, and that's why we haven't seen it return for years and years and years. Well, think about it. I'm a family in Milwaukee, and it's a cold, chilly night in winter, and I hoard the family into my van, and I drive downtown, and I struggle to find a place to park, only to go into, where's it going to be, in the
convention center and the cellular,
and I pay my $5 a person to go through a winter. Not a maze. Where they, the
snow globe.
the obstruction, the obstacle course.
Obstacle course.
Yeah, that sounds like a lot of fun to me. People hate the winter around here, and to put a name like Winterfest on it, seriously though, the timing, December 21st through the 31st. Awful.
Big shopping days when there's no big shopping venue
You're
downtown.
competing against all other kinds of holiday events and shopping and holiday vacations and Christmas and New Year's. I can't see this being successful.
How about 30 seconds? What if they did a weekend at Miller Park with some big acts or
I actually
something?
thought the snow globe was cool. It's been tried more than once, I think. Some of it has been evolving already. I mean, some of the things that take place now on New Year's Eve around downtown in different venues attract different, different forms of entertainment, and it's not a bad thing to have a shot at. Believe me, if you're going to have a winter event, have it inside.
Yeah,
All right.
Bad timing. And my version of Winterfest is a extended weekend in Naples, Florida.
Yeah, Denise, you're absolutely right.
Well, if you watch the Republican presidential debate from Iowa this past week, there were a lot of fireworks there, but it's not exactly what everybody expected. Here's Rick Horowitz.
I'm still trying to dig up the quote. I know it was President Obama, and I know it was at least a few months ago, and I'm pretty sure I can picture him at a lectern in the Rose Garden when he said it. The president was explaining the deal he and Congress had reached on some piece of legislation, and I still can't find the exact words, but it went something like this. Yes, he'd wanted this or that provision in the final bill he had just agreed to, but the Republicans had made clear that they wouldn't yield on that point, so he'd back down instead. And somewhere in Washington, Mitch McConnell must have been grinning like a Cheshire. Talk about handing over the secret formula. Then there's the quote I can dig up, the one from Bill Clinton that explains so much. And no, it's not, government shutdowns make me hungry. Can you send over an intern with a pizza? It's this one. When people feel uncertain, they'd rather have somebody who's strong and wrong than somebody who's weak and right. See, being the grown-up in the room will only get you so far. Sometimes you need to be the grown-up with the hammer. And what if we started calling them the Clinton surplus tax cuts? Then could we get rid of them? As long as they're the Bush-era tax cuts, they're holy things and untouchable. But call them the Clinton surplus tax cuts, and suddenly you're giving credit where the Republicans hate to give credit. You're also describing the conditions that made those tax cuts possible. conditions which vanished years ago. The Clinton surplus is gone, so haven't those tax cuts hit their pull date too? Thought for the day. If putting your political philosophy into practice always makes you the big winner, maybe it's not really a philosophy at all. Maybe it's simply an excuse. Or maybe it's just greed and callousness dressed up as principle. Remember that day or two during the debt ceiling debate when the politicians carrying water for the Tea Party fanatics actually seemed uncomfortable supporting tax breaks for oil companies and hedge fund managers and corporate jet owners at the same time they were demanding devastating cuts in programs for people far less fortunate? They got over it.
Well, thank you, Rick, and thank you so very much for watching. Enjoy the rest of your weekend.